Duncan, in terms of you had mentioned about the different examples of local currencies, there was one, I'm probably going to pronounce this one wrong, but
Mhm.
it's called e-porta money.
Yep,
Can you share a little bit about that one?
sure. Yeah. So the e-portemonnee, so it's a Dutch word for wallet, basically. It just says e-wallet in Flemish, because it's actually a Belgian currency. So this is one of the currencies that we helped design in the project that when I joined the New Economics Foundation. And so this was a community in northwest Belgium. Um, and interestingly, the initiator of the currency idea was the regional waste collector. And so what they wanted was a kind of currency that they could give to people to reward them for positive behavior. And then the idea being that then people could then use that currency to purchase from a kind of eco store, eco-efficient products, and just general stuff to make their house more ecologically friendly. So it had a kind of so the whole purpose was kind of ecological, and both sides of the kind of the currency kind of reinforce this ecological behavior. So you could earn the currency by, for instance, putting a no junk mail sticker on your letterbox, by buying some hens and putting them in the back garden. In a slightly creepy fashion, I think probably for British people, the waste company was actually weighing the waste and the research. So in Belgium, you have very much separate waste streams. The waste company was actually measuring the waste as it was exiting people's houses and then rewarding people for reducing the to landfill, and maybe moving it over to recycling. So, you can earn currencies by already demonstrating kind of ecological behavior. And then you could spend that same currency with, buying eco products. So it was a really kind of simple way. And again, the difference between a kind of loyalty incentive scheme in this case, in some sense, I hesitate to call it a currency because it didn't have multiple uses. Once it got to the shop, which the waste company owned, it just got cancelled. So it was a kind of 2-transaction thing, and then it stopped. Mm-hmm. And then new ones got issued, and this was all virtual. So there were no physical representations of the e-portemonnee. And again, it just shows how you can use the ideas of money so that you earn it for some valuable activity, and then also restricting the spending. So if you just, design how you earn it and then how you spend it, you can create a money system that just reinforces ecological behavior. And as Alex was mentioning, our current money system is absolutely pushing us in the opposite direction. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And a little bit closer, although a little bit closer to home, the Brixton pound. I heard that that can be used to pay things like council tax and other things like that.
Yeah, so the Brixton pound was exciting. So that was the first kind of urban example of a local currency, or an inner city at least. So they have a number of really interesting features. So, for instance, here it's our local currency here for the think tank, and so you can take up to 10% of your salary in Brixton pounds. Same if you work for the council. If you work for Lambeth Council, which is the council which Brixton is in, you can also get up to 10% of your salary in Brixton pounds. But yeah, there are a few interesting things that Brixton did. I mean, just off what Alex was saying about designing notes with the collector community in mind, the Brixton guys kind of found this out a little bit by accident when one of their first issued notes had a picture of David Bowie on it. So David Bowie was a Brixton resident, and actually gave his permission to be on the note, which is a nice kind of side bit of the story. But the David Bowie Brixton pound has a nominal value of £10. But if you ever get your hands on one, you can immediately go on eBay and get at least £25 or £30 for it. So this was money that it had an exchange value, but it also had, in Brixton, which would only ever have been £10, no Brixton resident would ever have given you any more than that. And probably not, maybe they might have given you £9 for it. But it developed its own value in another marketplace, and what was clever about them using David Bowie was that it sparked interest in a world beyond the kind of the money collectors, which are a really important market. And I know a few currencies that have done Alex's trick of really high denominations. There's another one in East London, which is called Hoe Street Central Bank. And they were actually issuing bonds, and they're going up to £1,000 to see if they can really reel the collectors in and part with big money. And I'm all for that, and because they're putting it straight to really good use. But yeah, so one of the other challenges, and I think Alex, mentioned it as well, is that you need to create a circulation environment, and especially where you're in Brixton. So Brixton, I think, have about 150 or 200 retailers that you can spend it at. You need to have spending options for all of them. So one of Brixton's really big wins was getting the local cash and carry as part of the currency, because suddenly all of the corner shops, even market stalls in Brixton Market, except Brixton Pounds, suddenly everybody needs something from the cash and carry. And so everybody was quite happy to accumulate notes because they knew that they would have the cash and carry. Now, obviously, then you get the cash and carry being a potential sink. And so then they had to find other spending options for that. And that's when they started thinking about, well, what about if we could get the council to accept this in lieu of tax? Now, wouldn't that be a really good win? And so Brixton was also the first place where you could use an alternative currency to pay your tax bill. And you could either do that as an individual, so they would accept it in lieu of council tax, so you could pay your council tax bill in. But almost more importantly, because ultimately what they needed to get was the businesses on side so that they would accept it and know that they always had an avenue to spend it, you could also pay your business rates in it. So, and that was a hugely positive story, because it meant that basically you could convince any business that they would have an outlet, a way to spend their currency. Now, again, it presented us, each challenge that you fix in this currency world presents you with the next challenge. So next, the council was then the sink. And so then they had to try and find ways of the council to spend the money. And so that then came the employees being paid in the currency. But I think what you really need to achieve there, and I think from what I understand, so Bristol is the other big local currency in the UK. So they have a similar kind of system. You can pay your council tax, you can pay your business rates. But their big win was to start to get Bristol Council to procure goods and services in Bristol pounds. So they, in fact, got a massive contract. It was in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. And again, partly funded through Bristol pounds, not totally funded in the same way a bit that Alex was explaining the projects that they helped to fund. But yes, now that they've got the council to start procuring in Bristol pounds, you're really starting to see a full kind of circulation from individual to business, business to business, business to council, and then council back out into the community. So you're really starting to see those kind of virtuous circulation systems happening. So yes, I think those are really, really important. Thinking about those spending options that work for everybody, because I think that's one of the big challenges, and it comes out in Minsky's quote. The challenge is really getting other people to accept it, and the more they feel they're in good company in accepting it, the more they're going to be likely to accept it. And so having these kind of anchor institutions in the local community, so for Brixton it was that cash and carry. Once they got them on board, it was much easier to sign up other businesses because they knew they'd have things to buy. And then there's the kind of the tax options, because everybody has to pay tax. So that's a really great spending option.
Okay, thank you. And the last one I just wanted to ask you around was the Mackey. Is that right?
Mm-hmm, yep. So the Mackey is a time bank. So the Mackey is a time bank in Amsterdam. And what makes a time bank different to the types of currencies that we've been talking about up until now is that in order to get an Echo or a Brixton pound, you need a pound sterling, which you then convert, and then you've got this lovely local currency. Now, the way a time bank works is to earn it, you have to give your time into it. And so generally these are networks of, they remain pretty small because they actually do, even though they're now mediated via online and websites, they still actually require that much more human interaction, that trust. And so they don't often evolve successfully above kind of 50 or 100 people, which is, and 100 or so is about the most that you can kind of know and trust in a network. And it does some really interesting things. So it values everybody's time equally. So I may be a doctor, somebody else may be a babysitter. Now, doctors don't often, I have to say, provide their time necessarily to time banks. But if they were, and I provided an hour of babysitting, and Alex, who is the nominated doctor for the example, then provided me an hour of doctor's consultancy, we would have cancelled out. And so it's a beautiful way of kind of equalizing us in this economy where, the amount you earn somehow is some kind of reflection of your importance in society. It kind of levels us out. We all have a set number of hours in the day, and allows us to contribute. It's also really great in communities where people are time rich but maybe cash poor. And there's an organization called, they've actually just changed name and I forget their new name. They used to be called Spice Time Credits, but sadly the spice epidemic has made that name not very palatable anymore. So they had to change it. But they basically run time bank systems around the UK. And they have some really amazing ones in old coal mining villages in Wales, where they have literally turned around a community through the use of time banks. Not only does it provide people an opportunity to work and provide services when maybe there's no jobs, that work then leads to a sense of empowerment, which then, when done at a large kind of community scale, leads to kind of community empowerment and can really transform communities. So it's just a really interesting, different way of thinking about the way we exchange, not in terms of kind of the relative value in the market of this good and service, and that traditionally, this is worth more than that. It's a lovely leveler and can operate nicely within a smallish group of people. And there are many hundreds of those in operation up and down the UK.